See, from binge watching K-dramas on Netflix to vibing on songs of BTS, from eating spicy kimchi and instant ramen to Indian companies investing billions of dollars in South Korea's tech ecosystem, India and South Korea are no longer just countries on a map. They are becoming part of each other's daily lives. But here's the real question. Is it just a cultural trend, or is there something much bigger cooking behind the scenes? See, because while Gen Z in India is obsessed with K-pop and K-dramas, government in New Delhi and Seoul are quietly building a strategic partnership that could shape the future of Asia. From defense deals to semiconductors to China's rising influence, the relationship is far deeper than it actually looks. See, on April of 2026, South Korea's president Lee landed in New Delhi for a state visit, the first by a South Korean head of state in 8 years. 16 MOUs were signed, a $50 billion trade target was announced, and a shipbuilding framework called VOYAGES was unveiled. And an India-Korea digital bridge was launched to accelerate semiconductor and AI collaboration.
South Korean President Lee Jae-myung arrived in India on Sunday, beginning his 3-day state visit from April 19 to 21. This is President Lee's first official visit to the country since he assumed office. President Lee was accompanied by First Lady Kim Hye-kyung along with a high-level delegation including ministers, senior government officials and prominent business leaders. Discussions will focus on enhancing cooperation across sectors such as trade, investment, shipbuilding, AI and other emerging technologies.
Now, this was not just a routine diplomatic visit. It was a signal that in a fractured world, two major Asian democracies are betting on each other harder than ever before. Today, we are going to break down exactly what has happened, why it matters, and whether the ambition will actually translate into results or not. Because as we'll see, the gap between declared intent and actual execution has been the defining problem of the relationship for the last 15 years. Hello, my name is Peetpal Singh and you're watching Perspective. Now the question is, where do India and South Korea actually stand? See, let's start with the baseline because the numbers are actually revealing. See, in the financial year ending March 2025, the total bilateral trade between India and South Korea stood at around $26.89 billion, according to the Commerce Ministry of India. Now, this sounds very substantial, but here's the uncomfortable truth. Back in 2018, both the countries had set a $50 billion trade target for 2030. And between 2018 to 2025, bilateral trade grew at a compounded annual rate of just 3%. Now, at that pace, reaching $50 billion target by 2030 would require growth to nearly triple overnight. Now, there's also a serious structural imbalance. India's exports roughly $6.5 billion worth of goods to South Korea, which are mostly raw materials, chemicals, and some pharma. And Korea exports approximately $18.5 billion to India. Electronics, machinery, steel and high-value manufactured goods. And India is running a trade deficit of around $12 billion with South Korea. Now this comprehensive economic partnership agreement, it has been in force since 2010, but it has largely served Korean exporters more than Indian ones. And on the investment side, despite South Korea's corporate giants like Hyundai, Samsung and LG having operated in India since 1990s and becoming dominant in their respective sectors, South Korea ranks only 13th amongst FDI investors in India. And cumulative FDI inflows from April 2000 to March 2025 stands at just around $6.69 billion, according to the India Brand Equity Foundation data. And compare that to countries like Singapore, which is around $174 billion investment in India, or US, which is around $70 billion investment in India. Korean mergers and acquisition activity in India has also been very modest. See, around just $200 to $300 million annually in the recent years, which is a very small share of Korea's total global merger and acquisition. So the honest starting point is that South Korea has a massive brand presence in India, but an underweight financial footprint. And India hasn't adequately leveraged Korean technology or Korean capital. And this visit was at its core an attempt to change that. See, the question now is, then why now? See, timing matters in diplomacy. So why is this push happening in April 2026? See, there are two major forces driving this urgency. First, the US-China decoupling. It has created a global scramble to diversify supply chains in semiconductors, electronics and critical manufacturing. And both India and South Korea, they are deeply affected. See, Korea relies heavily on Chinese rare earth inputs. And its chip industry needs stable, non-China aligned partners for components, talent and future production. And India, under its Semicon 2.0 mission, is building around 76,000 crore domestic chip ecosystem and needs technology partners beyond US and Taiwan. Now, second, what analysts are calling as the Hormuz shock, the ongoing instability in the Middle East following the US-Iran-Israel conflict in 2025-2026 has actually disrupted energy shipping lanes and rattled both the economies of India and South Korea. See, South Korea imports around 60% of its oil through Strait of Hormuz, and India is similarly exposed. And this shared vulnerability has made energy security cooperation not just desirable but strategically very, very essential. And in this context, the Modi-Lee summit at Hyderabad House on April 20th, 2026 was as much about geopolitical positioning as it was about economies of both the countries. Now let's go sector by sector through the key outcomes, what was there. See, when we talk about ships and ports, the VOYAGES framework was actually announced. Now, this is arguably the most consequential agreement of the entire visit. India and South Korea signed a comprehensive framework called VOYAGES, Vision for Operation of Yard-Assisted Growth with Efficiency and Scale, covering shipbuilding, port development, shipping logistics, and maritime heritage. Now, why does that matter? See, India has announced plans to procure over 400 vessels in the foreseeable future, a pipeline worth 2.2 lakh crores. And the problem is, India currently lacks the shipbuilding capacity to fulfill that order. And South Korea, home to 3 of the world's 5 largest shipbuilders, is now being invited as the anchor partner. And concrete details that has emerged include HD Korea Shipbuilding and Offshore Engineering entering a non-binding MOU with Cochin Shipyard to cooperate in advanced vessel production. Also, Samsung Heavy Industries struck a partnership with Swan Defence and Heavy Industries, which operates the former Reliance Pipavav shipyard in Gujarat. A second MOU committed BEML and HD Hyundai Samho to jointly design autonomous maritime cranes for Indian ports, tied to India's 90,000 crore port modernization plan. Separately, Korea is being invited to bid on India's 13.3 billion port PPP pipeline over the next 5 years, which includes the massive Vadhavan container port in Maharashtra and 150 MTPA multi-purpose terminal in Bahuda, Odisha. That is with respect to ports and ships. Now, with respect to semiconductor and AI, the digital bridge, PM Modi and President Lee jointly announced the India-Korea Digital Bridge, a formal initiative to deepen collaboration in AI and next-generation semiconductor technology. See, the partnership is strategically divided. South Korean companies like Samsung Electronics, SK Hynix are currently focused on entering India through the software and R&D side of the semiconductor value chain, and thereby leveraging India's engineering talent pool as well. And India's goal is to progressively absorb Korean fabrication know-how into its domestic ecosystem under its national semiconductor mission. And the two sides have also agreed to expand cooperation in quantum technology as well. And not just quantum technology, but cybersecurity, biotechnology, and AI-based governance also. So the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement upgrade. See, both the nations have issued a joint declaration to resume and expedite CEPA upgrade negotiations. See, the original CEPA, which was signed in 2009 and came into force in 2010, and it is now widely acknowledged to have failed India on 2 fronts. It deepened the trade deficit, and it didn't adequately cover new age sectors like digital trade, green economy, or supply chain integration. The upgrade negotiations will specifically target those gaps, including services exports from India, addressing non-tariff barriers, and creating a new investment facilitation mechanism. Also, an industrial cooperation committee will also be established as a permanent bilateral institutional mechanism to track its progress, which is why in these spheres the cooperation has deepened. Now, when we talk about defense, K9 Vajra and beyond. See, on defense, Ministry of External Affairs Secretary publicly confirmed that the third phase of K9 Vajra self-propelled howitzer supply is under discussion, this time with significantly greater technology transfer to India. See, the K9 Vajra is produced by L&T in India under license from South Korea's Hanwha Defense. The sides are also exploring co-development of the next generation anti-aircraft gun and missile systems, which would mark a meaningful step from procurement towards co-production. And when we talk about climate and energy, a joint statement on energy resource security and a joint statement on sustainability were also actually signed. And both the nations, they committed to cooperation under Article 6.2 of the Paris Agreement, which enables bilateral carbon market trading. a mechanism that lets both the countries count emission reductions achieved jointly towards their own NDC targets. India's net zero target is 2070. South Korea's net zero target is 2050. And South Korea also announced that it would also join India's Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative and the International Solar Alliance as well. And India will join South Korea's Global Green Growth Institute, triple GI. And with this, the cooperation again has actually deepened. Now, with respect to payment and finance, in a quiet but significant move, NPCI International, the global arm of India's unified payment interface ecosystem, signed an MOU with the Korean Financial Telecommunication and Clearings Institute. Now, this is essentially a framework for integrating India's UPI payment rails with South Korea's financial infrastructure, opening the door for seamless cross-border digital payments between South Korea and between India. See, but now let us discuss the structural challenges. See, here's where we need to be very clear-eyed. See, the POSCO case is the most instructive example of why India-Korea ambitions have historically stalled. See, in the mid-2000s, South Korean steel giant POSCO announced a $12 billion investment in India, one of the largest FDI commitments in Indian history at that time. And the project spent nearly 2 decades in limbo due to land acquisition problems, regulatory bottlenecks, and policy uncertainty. And POSCO eventually abandoned it. And it has since returned with a joint venture with the JSW Steel, a 6 million ton steel plant set to be operational by 2031. But the original saga cost nearly 20 years of value creation. Now, several experts, including Ashok Malik of the Asia Group and Reema Bhattacharya of Verisk Maplecroft, has specially flagged policy unpredictability, land acquisition delays, and regulatory complexity as the key deterrents of Korean companies to enter into India. Now, these are structural challenges that agreements and MOUs they can't resolve on their own. There's also a cultural and business gap between the two countries. Korean firms they tend to plan meticulously and move cautiously into new markets. India's regulatory environment, while is improving, still requires local relationship capital and institutional patience that many Korean executives are not accustomed to navigating. And on trade rebalancing, India's export basket to Korea is still dominated by relatively low value items. For the 50 billion target to be reached without a deepening on the deficit further, India needs to dramatically scale up exports in services, IT, pharmaceutical and specialty chemicals as well. And that's a structural shift that requires years of policy execution and not just a joint statement. Because joint statement won't do the changes, policy execution would. See, step back and look at the architecture of this partnership and a pattern would emerge. India and South Korea are not traditional allies. They don't share a land border, they are not in the same military alliance, but they share something arguably more durable: complementary economic structures and aligned strategic anxieties. South Korea has world-class technology, world-class capital, and global brand equity. India has massive domestic demand, a young workforce, and an emerging manufacturing infrastructure. South Korea is squeezed between an unpredictable US-China rivalry and an increasingly assertive North Korea, and India is navigating a complex border with China while trying to position itself as a credible alternative manufacturing hub to the world. See, Samsung's chairman, Lee Jae-yong, was present at the Modi-Lee summit and was photographed taking a selfie using a Galaxy Z Flip 7 made at Samsung's Noida plant in India. Now, that image is symbolic. A Korean flagship product assembled in India at a diplomatic summit. And this is exactly the kind of integration both the governments would want to scale. See, the launch of an economic security dialogue as a permanent bilateral mechanism is significant because it formalizes the idea that trade and technology are now matters of national security and not just commercial policy. But then the question is, where does this leave us? So the April 2026 Modi-Lee summit, they produced a most substantive bilateral framework India and South Korea have agreed to go in a generation. From a 2.2 lakh crore shipbuilding pipeline to digital bridge on semiconductor, from CEPA upgrade negotiations to carbon market cooperation, the breadth is actually real. But here's the honest bottom line. So the 50 billion trade target has been on the table since 2018. The CEPA has been flagged as inadequate since 2016. The POSCO saga showed what happens when India's implementation environment fails to meet its ambition. And the difference in 2026 is that geopolitical pressure to deliver is now much higher for both the sides and not just for India. See, India needs Korean technology, Korea needs Indian scale. The question is not whether two countries should deepen their partnership. The question is whether both the governments have institutional discipline to turn these MOUs into manufacturing lines, export orders, and real jobs or not. If they do, this relationship could genuinely become one of the defining economic partnerships of the next decade in Asia. If the agreements gather dust, like some have before, that too will tell us something important about where both the countries really are. Which is why MOUs are equally important, but more than MOUs, what is important is actual policy execution. If policy execution is not there at the ground level, MOUs won't suffice, and it would just be a textbook example of how relationships don't work on papers, but they actually work through reality. And which is why what needs to be ensured is real ground measures and actual implementation of the policy at a zero ground level. I hope you gained a new perspective from this session. Do let me know what are your views regarding India-South Korea partnership. All the very best. Have a beautiful day. Thank you.